All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Thank you all. It's such a pleasure to have... I know. You know, when I cheat death, I get a little more applause than the rest of the year. I understand. Greetings from Southern California. Some of us are okay. Some of us have really experienced some devastating loss. We'll talk about that. As you know, I lost my home to fire once in a place called Brentwood, California. I know there's a Brentwood in Northern California too, but this one in Southern California where my home was, and we lost the whole neighborhood to fire. That wasn't that long ago. It was 2019. And so the degree to which fires have reemerged in bigger, more ferocious ways in Southern California is something that is not lost on me. And we'll talk more about it in the weeks to come. It's not just Southern California, obviously. It's all of California and all of the West, for that matter. And now the other shoe, which we knew would drop, has dropped. I think increasingly insurance will be ungettable in California. But we're going to talk more about that. We'll put it off until a little bit later in the show. I've got a great show for you today with special guests and more. Two brilliant minds will be joining the show today. I mean, in addition to the brilliance you already get from Kim and Albert and myself, I'm talking about we're augmenting the brilliance that is already here with additional brilliance. So it's a yes. I think so. Yeah, I think it's... Corey Brettschneider, the brilliant constitutional lawyer and author out of Brown University. He will join us in just a few minutes. And one of the great legal analysts in the English-speaking world, David Katz, joins us in hour two. We'll talk about any number of things from the Jack Smith 2-volume report that may find its way to the public to many of the other legal matters swirling Trump, but we'll get beyond Donald Trump as well. There are other things that we can dice and slice and analyze legally. And we'll do it with two great legal minds. Have a lot to talk about when it comes to the fires. Kim, I want to say something publicly that I told you privately, which is for you to step up the way you did yesterday and host the show in my absence. It was extraordinary, and you did an extraordinary job. I mean, Kim, as you know, just lost her dad, and we told her to take all the time she needed, and she insisted on coming back. And because you want to come back sooner, I said, no. You take another couple of days. And then the emergence of this event that required us being off the air, essentially, unless somebody stepped in. And Kim did step in yesterday and was brilliant. And that's the part that I wanted to acknowledge. You were just great. I only caught chunks of the show, but everything I saw was just magnificent. Really, really terrific. Yeah, excellent. And Albert was great, which is...
What?
I know. I was surprised also. Albert really stepped up.
I'm surprised as well, Mark. I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if I could, exceed that bar that I had for myself.
Albert really likes to keep mediocrity as his the cornerstone of his work. And
consistency, Mark. That's what I call it. Consistent.
I see. Consistency. Okay, well, some people call it consistency. Some people call it mediocrity. But the point is, we can count on him being, C minus work.
Yesterday he was A+. He rose to the occasion.
He really did.
The problem with doing that is then you see what he's capable of, and then you want more of it.
Yeah, pretty brutal. All right, let me get into what's going on, and we have all kinds of different angles on what's happening in California and has happened in California. So
The Mark Thompson Show.
And we will cover a little bit later in Kim's news the vigil, the memorial service that's going on for the former president, Jimmy Carter. But for now, the California fires. Can I start with something that has gone viral? Look, it's all sad. It's all tragic. It's all devastating. It is unprecedented. The loss literally is unprecedented in all of the many California fire episodes. None has equaled or will equal this when all the ashes have been sifted through. It's tragedy on a tragedy. But can I start, as we do on this show, with something a little lighter? David Muir was reporting, and by the way, I remember when my house was lost to fire, my neighborhood burned, and there's just ashes and nothing left all around. And David Muir and World News set up right in front of my house. I mean, I wasn't there anymore because of the fire, but, you know, it was kind of wild. And so to see David Muir setting up again for yet another California fire was something. But then the internet noticed something about David Muir, and you will see it here. And again, this is just the lighter side, if you will, for a moment. As David Muir turns, and he looks so good, that David Muir, you know, with the wind blowing, and he's wearing that ABC News yellow slicker.
You know what? He looks clean.
He does. He looks clean. He looks ready. He looks
like he hasn't been on the street reporting all night. He looks like he was cozy in a little trailer sitting next to the
You know
fire,
what, Kim?
and when
How
they
dare
said
you?
time for a live shot.
How dare you insult my David Muir?
Why are you yelling?
All right, now watch him
as he
turns. As he turns, there are the paper clips. No, I mean, what are those? Clothespins. Clothespins there behind him, pulling his jacket slightly tighter so it gives the look when he turns forward of it being form-fitting and of him being slim and handsome, which is what he is, Kim, and you can't deny it. And I actually love that he did that. I have mad respect for that. How's that? People are going, oh my God, can you believe he did? Yeah, I can believe it. It's TV. You gotta, I have mad respect.
The jacket was just too big, okay? There's a vanity in the face of a crisis.
It's not vanity, it's television. Let me tell you something. On this show, all the time, I get, oh, at least you're not wearing that T-shirt again, or blah, blah, blah. It's like, dude, please. I'm not really worried about the wardrobe day to day. I'm trying to get information and get good guests for you and that sort of thing. But they're always, and they're large groups of people who sit there and are, their buzz is killed if David Muir's jacket isn't tight and he doesn't look handsome. So I have mad respect for him, but Kim clearly on another side of things. Anyway, her favorite guy, Kim's favorite guy, is Anderson Cooper, who we also here's Anderson Cooper.
So can I just say, look at Anderson Cooper. He's been out all night long. He's sooty. He is dusty. He's exhausted. He's been reporting. This is a reporter's reporter. There's no, let's clothespin the back of my jacket. He's getting out and talking to people. See, David Muir, he just came out of the trailer. Anderson Cooper, he's doing the real work.
Now, I completely disagree. First of all, we don't even know if that ash is real. I mean, you know, he could have.
Hands. Yeah, look at his hands are all like filled with soot.
It's brilliant. Why do you think he's putting his hands up toward the camera? He's got special ash makeup in the truck. He only. I have no. I have mad respect for both those.
That's real.
Yeah, all right. But there he is talking to Gavin Newsom, and that brings us into the more serious part of things. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yes, I believe the latest numbers, 5 dead in all of this, and thousands, of course, evacuated, and many more thousands in structures and residences left in ruins. It is a fire that was energized by unprecedented Santa Ana winds, gusts to 100 miles an hour, as we discussed before, and I think we've touched on from time to time. Regardless of what assets you have, when you have even winds of 40 miles an hour, there's just no way to beat back flames with hoses. You cannot, it doesn't matter what physical assets you have to fight the fire. 40-mile-an-hour winds are going to drive that fire, and there's no beating it back. And so when you have winds double that, you can imagine the devastation. You don't need to imagine. That's what we've seen. Albert, we have scenes from the fire that I will share with you. I mean, it's a total devastation. Is that what we're doing first, those scenes, Albert? Is that what we have? Yeah, this is the Palisades fire. And again, the problem here was that in the Palisades particularly, and Malibu, where there was so much destruction, the problem was air assets like you see here. Look how effectively that puts out,
Yeah.
this is in Hollywood, okay? That was in Hollywood last night. Now, Hollywood last night was gridlocked because people were fleeing that blaze and they were told to evacuate. But the 15,000 acres to which they've referred, that's Malibu. That's the beach and the water behind it. All of those homes, and you see there in the burnt out ash of a car, all of them are right there on the coast. This is some of the most expensive real estate in the world. It's Carbon Beach, La Costa Beach. That's where David Geffen lives. That's where Dr. Dre lives. So these are people with a lot of money, and their homes reflect it. And their homes are now a total loss.
At least when you're talking about people with that much money, maybe it's easier for them to come back and rebuild than people who are solely relying on the insurance money, because without it, they'd be destitute.
Yeah, I think that's a decent point to make. I guess what the reason it's particularly notable is I'm pointing to the fact that no one was spared.
Sure.
Right? Regardless of how rich you were, regardless of where your house was, you were, and Pacific Palisades, and this is where they're fighting these fires, and again, this is going scene to scene. The Pacific Palisades area is filled with some of the wealthiest and most powerful people in all of America, and particularly show business people, producers, agents, people who have terrific fortunes that they have built on work in show business. Now, the mayor was confronted there. You just saw it in a second. She was coming back from a prearranged trip, but she has her own controversy to deal with because she did cut the budget, the firefighters' budget, by $17 million. And so you have to, I think, account for that if you're the mayor of Los Angeles. The other thing I would say, though, is I don't believe that $17 million more would have made a difference. This is, as I said, it's a confluence of events with the wind velocities in excess of anything we've seen driving these fires. And that, coupled with the fire, I think it made it an untenable situation to in any way contain.
They were also trying to blame Mayor Bass for the lack of water pressure in the fire hydrants. And I don't think you can blame her for that either, because you have so many people tapping into the fire hydrants at the same time. The water pressure is going to be really low. So I don't know if that is her fault either. I don't think that's fair. Yeah,
I completely agree, at least on the surface. I mean, if we need to talk about this more, we will. I think this is a situation that will extend well beyond the mayor's office. There are certain grim realities about life in California, but the blame game has started, and it's not Mayor Bass. Donald Trump took the opportunity to exploit this situation for political gain. And I wanted to run a little bit. I just thought this was a decent summary. It's only a couple of minutes. Give it a go. And this is Donald Trump laying it out at the feet of Gavin Newsom. When this is by the way, I'll just tell you this is a fire that started in the city. It is not a fire that started in some woodland that hasn't been maintained appropriately, and if only they would clear the forest floor. This isn't a forest fire. This isn't a wildfire. So you GOP pieces of dung who turn and blame Californians and their leadership for this are barking up the wrong tree. This is a devastating loss we've endured. We've been up for 3 days straight with this crap. We have our cars packed with all of our personal belongings, ready to take our animals out, on a constant edge of our seat preparation. I mean, literally, I haven't slept in days. And we have to listen to the politicization of this moment. It's disgusting. It's grotesque. Go ahead, Albert.
Elect Trump attacked Governor Newsom. Writing on Truth Social, Governor Gavin Newsom refused to sign the water restoration declaration put before him that would have allowed millions of gallons of water from excess rain and snowmelt from the north to flow daily into many parts of California. He is the blame for this. Governor Newsom's office responded in a statement, there is no such document as the Water Restoration Declaration. That is pure fiction. And earlier tonight, just a few moments ago, Governor Newsom himself responded.
People are literally fleeing. People have lost their lives. Kids lost their schools. Families completely torn asunder. Churches burned down. This guy wanted to politicize it. I have a lot of thoughts, and I know what I want to say. I won't. I stood next to a president of the United States of America today, and I was proud to be with Joe Biden. And he had the backs of every single person in this community. He didn't play politics, didn't try to divide any of us.
Joining me now is Charlie Sykes, an MS.
That's, I thought he said it quite well. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm having all kinds of issues with the camera today. I apologize. Oh, my God. What a day to have these issues. Yeah, I don't know why it does that. But the point is that this very desperate situation is being exploited that way. It's disgusting. And you can see Trump just invents stuff, absolutely
because
invents
there is
it.
no, whatever that is, Water Declaration Act. There is that, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But let's just make it up as, as part of the whole blame game.
Yeah. He's,
and you know what's crazy, Mark? It's, you look around in situations and crises like this, and you look for the people that are helping. Is Trump helping? No, he's not helping.
Well,
what
I
if
mean,
we heard from Biden? Biden is just, he's doing his job. He's getting what the resources that California needs in place. What is Trump doing except stirring up trouble? Nothing.
I don't know that you can say F you to him, Randy. Newsom at some point needs to be less diplomatic, Randy says, and just come out and say F you to Trump, and that Trump should learn what he's talking about before spouting idiocy. I mean, it sounds good in the moment. It's a little like saying, you should just need to go into your boss who's getting on your nerves and just tell him to F off and to get off your back. You're the most productive salesperson in the team. You can do that. You might feel good in the moment, but I guarantee it'll be about 45 seconds before you go, oh my God, what have I just done? Because you need some relationship with Washington. And Trump knows that, and he's using his leverage that way. But he's a despicable guy, and that's a despicable thing to have done, what Trump is doing and what Trump will likely continue to do. I'm just glad that Biden is president right now and able to divert and dedicate funds to the devastation in California. One other thing, quickly, Leo Terrell, who I used to have dinner with regularly, he was a friend of mine. I can't believe how he has sucked up to the MAGA world the way he has, the same way he sucked up to O.J. Simpson. And he has just crawled up Donald Trump's rump in such a gross way. Here is Leo Terrell exploiting it as well. He's a civil rights attorney. This guy, he should be someone who is arguing for those who need a representative. Instead, he's become a talking head. He's with Sean Hannity. Go ahead, Albert, please.
Oh.
No, did Albert leave?
Albert had to step away. But that's okay because we'll get back to it. But we have Corey Brettschneider is here.
Yes, but I was leading up to something, and Corey would have liked to have seen it, wouldn't you, Corey? Wouldn't you have liked to have seen what I was about to? I mean, that lead, Corey, was that lead in not great, Corey? Come on.
I loved it.
All right. I'm disgusted, Albert, that Albert has to take his dog to the vet, I think, or something such. This is the crap that we have to deal with. All right, let me.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Let me bring him on in a way he is deserving of. He is quite an extraordinary guy. I'm so excited to have him back. He's a professor at Brown University. He teaches constitutional law and politics there, but he's a writer of great distinction. He's written for the New York Times, Politico, the Washington Post, and Time Magazine. He's the author of books From the President and the People to The Oath and the Office, all the way live from New York. How about it for Corey Brettschneider? Look at you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
and,
great to have you
of course,
here.
I've been listening in, and I'm so sorry about everything that's happening out there. I have family out there. A lot of my cousins are in California and Los Angeles. I went to college out at Pomona, and so I really feel for all of you and wishing you all the best of luck.
Thank you so much, pal. It's been a very tough few days, of course, and sadly, it's not over.
Yeah.
if I can draw on, your experience, you really do talk about in your most recent book, as I recall, the oath that the president takes and the idea that the president and the presidency have an allegiance to certain values that underpin this nation. It would appear that, sadly, those values seem to be receding with this incoming administration.
Oh yeah, I think there are two traditions. The argument of the presidents and the people are there are really two traditions of thinking about the Constitution, American history, and both claim to show allegiance to the Constitution. One is a democratic tradition, and that's often represented not by state officials or even presidents, but by citizens who oppose authoritarianism. And often it's citizens who are kind of calling presidents to account by pointing to the idea that they're supposed to, as you say, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. And some presidents have lived up to that. And in fact, the way that we've often recovered from authoritarianism is that citizens calling out authoritarian presidents have almost never relied on the courts. They've relied instead on politics and on the idea of recovering with future presidents. But we also have another sad tradition in the country's history, and that's of authoritarian presidents claiming their own vision of the Constitution to do basically whatever it is they want. And often that means shutting down the opposition, as John Adams did, for instance, or arguing for the idea that Black Americans aren't even people under the Constitution, as President Buchanan did, or arguing for second-class citizenship as the core of American values, as Woodrow Wilson did. So we have these two traditions, one democratic idea of the Constitution and one authoritarian, and it's obvious where we're headed, very deep into the authoritarian one. That's what's coming next. And that's the argument of this new book, The Presidents and the People, 5 leaders who threatened democracy and the citizens who fought to defend it. And the 5 leaders are all pre-Trump, but it's all about Trump. When you look at these examples, every single one of them really speaks to the way that he's threatening the democratic idea of the Constitution.
And so in the book, The Presidents and the People, we see, you're saying, the emergence of an opposition that ultimately is effective in pulling these presidents who have authoritarian instincts or leanings back from that authoritarianism?
Absolutely. On the one hand, it's a book that tries not to stray from the warning that the presidency is extremely dangerous, despite the high ideals that you and I started off by talking about. And those high ideals, are often claimed not by the presidents who threaten democracy, but by citizens who fight back. And the point of the book, the hopeful part, at the same time that it's honest about the danger of American democracy and the danger of the presidency in particular, given its power. It's always been powerful and always been dangerous. But the hopeful part is that, right, these citizens have fought back and they've won. And so when we look at, how dire things look, we've been here before and we've recovered. And again, it's never the court really that saves us. It's always citizens taking matters into their own hands, and specifically by forming what I call democratic constitutional constituencies to rally around recovery presidents. So in the first instance, the first case study, it's John Adams' really vicious shutdown of the opposition, as opposed by the people who were shut down, the editors who made their own trials, a trial of Adams, and they prevail on Jefferson, but really Madison to put the right to dissent, the right to free speech back.
Can you speak to that, just to give us a sense of that? Like when you talk about shutting down when Adams tried to shut down the opposition, can you speak to what that looked like?
Wow, it really wasn't metaphorical, and it's exactly what Trump is promising to do. John Adams did do in 1798. He signed the Sedition Act, and the Sedition Act was structured as a way of actually eliminating opposition to Adams' reign. And so it was written in a way that said that if you criticize the president of the United States, essentially go to prison. If you criticize the vice president, you're scot-free. Now, why would you structure it that way? The vice president at the time was Thomas Jefferson, a member of the opposition party in opposition to Adams. So from the beginning, and a lot of times, like people like McCullough and other historians, we tend to love presidents and presidential history, and they were so brilliant. So McCullough and the miniseries that comes from his work just downplay this moment. But we know now is 126 prosecutions of the opposition. Trump's threatened 100 people. This is 26 more that were actually gone after, that were prosecuted. And, they included a sitting congressman, Matthew Leon, a member of the opposition party, the main editors who were criticizing Adams' policies. So this happened. It wasn't just an attempt. He really did shut down the opposition party. And of course, we're coming off January 6th. And one of the craziest cases that I talk about is one where an editor uncovered Adams' plot to basically cheat in the Electoral College by putting cronies in place on the day of certification of the election to ensure that the votes wouldn't be certified unless they were for Adams. And it's exactly the plot that John Eastman and Trump came up with. So, that's the theme. The hope comes from the fact that we've been here before, but that we've prevailed in the end.
The kind of support he has from his henchmen, I mean that generically, the support he has, I'm talking about Trump, does that also have a parallel in history?
Yeah. We could just, I think it's true of each of these examples has a deep parallel, including to this idea of just diehard loyalists who are willing to do whatever he wants. One of the things that seems so appalling to us, rightly, by the way, is the way that so many of the justices, Clarence Thomas, sort of is just one example, are the president's henchmen. They just decided a case that gave him a get out of jail free card for the most dangerous acts that really anyone in the world could commit, the official acts as president. And that's where president, of course, is at his highest power. And you might think that's unprecedented, but no, actually, that's exactly what happened during Adams. In fact, Samuel Chase, the most prominent Supreme Court justice of the time, works with Adams' party to shut down the opposition. And in fact, one of the most prominent editors, Samuel Chase, is on trial for simply criticizing Adams, the kind of stuff that Saturday Night Live would consider tame at this moment. Chase, the Supreme Court justice, ensures that he doesn't even bring up the right to free speech, that he can't defend himself by sitting on the trial. So these guys were, we think that we're in trouble now. It was even more blatantly partisan then.
I mean, should we take heart in that, Corey? I mean, it's a weird thing to say because it looks like we're about to see this incredible train wreck.
That's right. I do think you can take heart. It requires honesty. So much of our history, we're lied to about what happened. And, the way that works is we create all these past presidents that they were all heroes. And Adams, is the most recent example. And so I think that's sort of given us a naive sense of what American politics is. American politics has always had a loaded gun in it, and that's the presidency is very dangerous and has been from the beginning. And in fact, in the question of whether or not even to ratify the Constitution, Patrick Henry, the revolutionary hero, was against ratifying the Constitution. He says, look, what if you have a criminal president? What's going to happen to this criminal president? What will stop him? Well, it's supposed to be impeachment, but that won't work if the co-partisans are there. What about indictment? Well, who's going to do the indicting? That's unlikely to work. And his worry was that a criminal president would see that he couldn't be stopped and would basically claim dictatorship. So that danger is very real. It's been there from the beginning. So why is it that I find hope in this crazy story? It looks like we should be petrified. And the answer is that because even in the face of these dire moments, Adams didn't prevail, that citizens, like your show, people speaking out throughout media and on social media, they were able to stop him. And that's what I think is going to happen again, that we'll be able to stop this wannabe tyrant.
Just looking at comments as you are speaking, and one is, what did Orwell say about the truth? Intellectual honesty is a crime in any totalitarian country, but even in England, it is not exactly profitable to speak and write the truth. There is a fear that can cow opposition, right?
Man.
And you're seeing it already as the Bezoses of the world, they fold like pup tents to this incoming administration. Zuckerberg as well. These are extremely powerful people with massive social media machines that can propel any narrative they want. Can you speak to that?
I think that's, been true from the beginning, that you see very quickly that as authoritarians try to claim power, that many people are just too willing to go along with it, partly out of fear. I mean, one of the craziest parts of this episode that we're beginning with, the Adams shutdown of the opposition, is Jefferson is vice president sitting there watching. He actually attended the Senate as this Authoritarian Sedition Act is passed, and he's worried about speaking out because he thinks he can be in prison, won't be in place to really help the country to recover. So that fear is very real. And yes, it's disheartening that we're seeing so many corporate leaders defect so quickly. And Bezos and Zuckerberg, of course, are the most prominent. And we'll see more of that. And yet, if there's no opposition, there really is no way to recover. Part of I guess, I want my book to be realistically hopeful, but not naively so, because there is nothing in the Constitution, nothing in the facts of recovery of the past that will survive this. I mean, you really could have a collapse, as Patrick Henry warned, into a kind of criminal authoritarianism. And it really depends on, people speaking out. Now, one thing that people ask me all the time is, but isn't the media so fragmented now? And it's true. We've had periods of American history where we had our Walter Cronkite, who could speak out against authoritarians like McCarthy. But in the founding, that's not true. Media is as fragmented or more than it is now. So many of these editors, their readers were in the thousands, not in the tens of thousands even, And so I think part of the message is that, like, or Frederick Douglass, who really is the hero of the book, and at a time when African Americans are denied by the Dred Scott case and President Buchanan all rights under the Constitution, he's able to use his following of really a few thousand subscribers to Frederick Douglass's paper and the North Star to create opposition that eventually snowballs into success. And so that's part of my message too, that even shows and podcasts and Mark Thompson Live, even if the listenership and viewership isn't in the millions, it's in the thousands, that's enough, and that can work and is essential, actually, especially as corporate media starts to abandon the role that they need to play in calling Trump out. I worry, of course, about we saw Morning Joe, for instance, and other media already not quite taking the stand that they should be taking. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really, it's an interesting media landscape that exists now. Fewer readers, fewer getting the newspaper, fewer newspapers, huge news deserts. And if you look at the numbers, just as into this digression or whatever that we're kind of getting into, how media and how opposition expresses itself and finds a way to connect with the populace. If you look at those news deserts, Trump won over 50% of those voters in places that there were news deserts, where there's really no newspaper serving those communities. And, you're only getting the tepid local news broadcasts, which are, if it bleeds, it leads kind of thing, and whatever handout is being provided. And not to mention the immense chain of radio and television stations owned by right-wing companies like Sinclair. So I'm, of course, a pessimist, but I cling to optimists. So I have a welcoming disposition toward optimists. But I must tell you, I just feel like there's a grim few years ahead.
Definitely, and I don't want to hide from that. I agree with that. I mean, the hopefulness, I think, comes from the fact that we can prevail, and part of it too, as we're getting into this discussion that I'm trying to point out as things look, and again, I'm not hiding from how bleak they do look, and they're bleak partly because of, this isn't any office that Trump has. It's the office of the presidency, arguably the most powerful political office in the world. Control over the nuclear arsenal without any real check on it, for instance. Commander-in-chief power, which we're already seeing despite his, fake isolationism at a moment's notice. He turns into a warmonger and talking about taking over Greenland. So where does the hope come from? I mean, it partly comes from imagining ourselves back into these other moments. So if you think about what it was like to be one of these 126 people facing prosecution, or even the sitting vice president facing potential prosecution, a very real possibility that Jefferson was going to be prosecuted by his political opponent. Or I mentioned, I'll come back to Frederick Douglass, who actually has to flee the country because he's being hunted by Buchanan and his allies, including the governor of New York, and flees to Canada and then to the UK, where he gives some of his most famous speeches about the idea of a democratic constitution. It looked impossible that America was going to have a constitution that defended the basic rights of Black Americans during that period of Buchanan, or during the earlier period of the founding, that we would have a right to criticize the president, a right that Adams explicitly didn't believe in. And yet we prevailed. So even in our darkest moments, and this I don't think is the darkest, I think it's maybe equal to some of those moments.
It's a photo finish, is it, in
not
darkness?
The worst. Yeah, it's not clearly the worst. It's a photo finish, I think, right? We still prevailed. So that's part of it, that the system has proven resilience, if the opposition remains, and even if it's small, it's got to be there, and it is there now. I mean,
Well, let me just follow up on that, though. I mean, the opposition party seems pretty lame, just to speak frankly, in terms of their, in terms of the pushback on what's happening. They're lame, and they, and I wouldn't mind if, in our moments together, if you commented on the Merrick Garland thing. Merrick Garland, I've been railing on him since he was appointed. I've always thought that was a bad appointment. He slow walked everything for 2 years, and then, again, now we let the clock run out on Trump being held to account for anything. But anyway, leave him aside for a moment. But I do want to visit with that question. The opposition just doesn't seem to be there. The Democrats just don't seem to be. They don't have that Frederick Douglass in them.
That's right. But, it never came from the party. It never came either from government officials, the real opposition that saved us in these dire moments. And again, they were very dire, equal to this, authoritarian moments of the past. And it didn't come from public officials, and it also didn't come from political parties. It came from citizens who organized themselves and then galvanized themselves around official candidates. So if you take Douglass, he's just, it's not that, he sees Lincoln in the wings, for instance, in 1860. And when Lincoln is elected, he says, there's no difference between the parties. Lincoln at the time is still believes that Dred Scott is wrongly decided, but it's the law of the land. He's a moderate, I think would be a polite way to put it. He believes the Fugitive Slave Act is wrong, but should be enforced. And Douglass is like, this is the opposition. We need something so much more radical. And he stands apart from the party, pushing party leaders and pushing Lincoln himself in a series of conversations directly in person into a more radical, decent stance on behalf of the basic rights of Black Americans. The newspaper editors, there really isn't an organized system of political parties, and they take advantage of that in shaping the agenda of the election of 1800 more than than Jefferson himself did. And I don't think Jefferson particularly loved free speech, but these editors did, and they made it, the election of 1800, about free speech. So again, that's the other part of the hope, that it really has always come from citizens really kind of putting the issue of basic rights and anti-authoritarianism on the agenda and using it to push the party and candidates in particular to embrace their views. And so, I think that's what has to happen now. It's not going to come necessarily from members of Congress. And, I should say, too, if you want to transition to the Garland point, which is so important, the last part of the book is I interviewed Daniel Ellsberg and two of the living members of the grand jury who tried to indict Richard Nixon. And really what we're facing with Trump and Garland is a failure to ever come to terms with the fact that a president, if he or she commits crime, should be tried and imprisoned, full stop. And this idea of immunity has its origin story in really the failure to indict Nixon, and in the pardon, which hid all of Nixon's crimes so much more than Watergate, the thing that we know about. And if we knew the extent of Nixon's crimes, I believe we would have seen the reason to prosecute them. And there was a nascent citizens movement led by the grand jury, again, two of whom I spoke to. These were ordinary people, low-income people. Ethel Peoples is one of the women I spoke to who was a janitorial worker. And yet they sat there, and as Ethel Peoples says to me in my interview with her, and as I repeat in the book, when I saw the president's crimes, I knew he had to go to prison because he's not any better than any of us. It was just the simplest, most common sense thing. And Garland, for all his learning and his, distinguished career, never saw that. Like, come on, the guy committed a crime. He should have been indicted so much sooner than he was. And I think that with time, that case might have been developed in a way that might have gone better, and at least we would have fought back against the ridiculousness of the immunity case that said that former presidents can't be indicted for their official duties. And if not, then citizens should have demanded, and still should, the reconfiguration of a court that's abandoned the basic idea that no person, not even a president, is above the law.
I mean, I don't know what that reconfiguration looks like, Corey Brettschneider. I mean, you can demand it. I think there is demand for it, but it appears that the president's in control of, and the Senate, of course, in the confirmation process, and the Senate's in the pocket of the president in this instance. It seems as though they're in total control of the disposition of that court and the constituents of that court.
Right. I mean, but, these are all the current design. There's nothing in the Constitution, for instance, that limits the court to 9 people.
Sure.
We did have.
Just to follow up on that, Corey, you'd need the Senate to change that, wouldn't you? You'd need Congress to change that.
Yeah, this isn't something I'm talking about in the near future. I mean, part of the theme of the book, and maybe this will seem less hopeful, is I'm not talking about these resistance movements on behalf of a democratic idea of the Constitution. They never really win in the moment. I mean, the truth of the system that we have is that a president is in power for 4 years, and we could talk about impeachment. That's very unlikely, as we've seen. So what I'm talking about is a long-term recovery that will take another election, that will take the midterms as a sort of way of gearing up. But what we've got to do, and which, and let me just be very blunt, because it isn't just Garland, it's Biden as well. There really was a failure to come to terms with the fact that the structure of American politics is dangerous, because there isn't a way to hold a president to account. And part of it, during the Nixon administration, of course, Nixon fires Archibald Cox, who is pushing towards an indictment of him. And that system that allows a president to essentially, fire the attorney general if he refuses to fire the special prosecutor, and until you get an attorney general who's a lackey, and Nixon found that in Bork, who did fire the special prosecutor. That system that allows that was stopped for a period of time. There was and President Carter, who just passed away, is responsible for it. There was a brief period where Carter signed into law the Independent Counsel, the Ethics in Government Act, which had a law called the Independent Counsel Law. And that structure allowed for an independent prosecutor who couldn't be fired by the president to not only investigate, but arguably indict a president. It was the opposite system of the one that we have now. And although I argued hard, including with members of the inner circle of Biden's inner circle, that we need to return to that law, there was real resistance to it, because the thought was, we'll have another Ken Starr. And look what Ken Starr did to Clinton. And Ken Starr was the last independent prosecutor. And my response to that is, better 10 Ken Starrs than 1 Donald Trump. This is such a dangerous system that we need to have a system in which a president can be held criminally accountable. And this all goes back to the story of Nixon and our failure to really deal with his crimes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This camera just keeps kicking out. I'll deal with it. I wanted to share some comments with you, which I'll do in just a second. Let me just deal with this as I'm
reading them too as we go through.
Yeah, we've gotten some good comments, and so to that end. There is a mechanism to hold a president accountable, impeachment and conviction. The Senate could have convicted and didn't have the balls to do it, says Randy. Of course, that's
and certainly that's right. And I was a huge proponent in both the January 6th case and the first Trump impeachment over the proposed quid pro quo with the president of the Ukraine, certainly for impeachment and conviction. But the reality, here's the sad reality, that I look at in the book, which is that these formal checks, including impeachment, have never worked. During the Andrew Johnson impeachment of the 19th century, a white supremacist president really tried to bring America back to slavery with a different name. There was a serious attempt to remove him as the walking threat to multiracial democracy that he was, and it failed. It came a vote short. And we saw that too during the 2 Trump impeachments. January 6th in particular is such a clear case of where the system was supposed to not only remove a president, but there's a second vote in impeachment after the conviction vote, 2/3, 50% to ensure disqualification, that you could never run again. And that didn't work either. So part of what I'm saying in the book is that, those formal checks that we learned about in grade school, including impeachment, they really aren't the way that we can save things. We really need citizens to demand laws like the independent counsel law, for instance, that will create real criminal accountability.
CC Ryder says the GOP gaslighting line, "We need to come together and heal the country," started after Nixon to protect GOP corruption, to stop investigations or even discussion in the public. But with Democrats, GOP lock her up. It's right. It was more of a reducto that the GOP did with the lock her up. I wanted to push this along to you. Underdog asks, Mr. Brettschneider, could please, it's Professor Brettschneider, if you would, or Corey, could President Biden declassify Jack Smith's classified documents in the January 6th reports on the grounds of national security or on any other grounds?
Well, the real question, I think, in the Jack Smith case, and this goes back to Garland, is whether or not we're going to see the report. And I think that's really the issue here. And the report certainly would talk about the details of what the classified documents were and what happened. And the obvious, if we're not going to have an indictment, obviously we need to see this. And Judge Aileen Cannon has blocked the release. But to my mind, the way that she's done it, if you look at it, she's saying essentially this setup, which is so weak of a special prosecutor, that it is unconstitutional. That's her argument, that a president can't be checked even by this weak special prosecutor. So she's saying everything that Smith did is unconstitutional, including the report, and that's why it can't be released. There's a super easy way around it. Garland, to come back to him, can just say, well, I have this material and I'm not an unconstitutional officer. My position is solidly written into the Constitution and I'm releasing it. And he's got to do that like yesterday because the American people, it's so crucial that we see the crimes. We never saw the crimes in Nixon. We saw Watergate only, not the attempt to kill Daniel Ellsberg, which I talk about on the Capitol steps, not the attempt to blow up the Brookings Institution in order to steal secret material that was in the safe, showing that Nixon had collaborated with the Viet Cong illegally before his election, convincing them to postpone the war until they could get a better deal with him. All those crimes are unknown to the American people, and these crimes will be unknown if Garland doesn't release this report, which he absolutely has to do.
Yeah, the covering the asses of presidents and other key public officials who are involved in these heinous acts is something that America has a pretty gross history with. And I guess I just wanted to revisit that viewer's question. You're saying, and your answer for that matter, you're saying, Garland has the power right now just to release the report. He could do it without any kind,
Her whole argument is about Smith this, Smith that. Okay, fine. It's not about Garland. Garland can just release the report.
Yeah. Wow. Michael Reich says, I can't believe he is getting a skate on the documents case. At a minimum, Cannon should be censured again. I always felt that the documents case, maybe I made this point to you before, I've made it excruciatingly clear over and over and over again. I felt the documents case was the most powerful case from the standpoint of reputational harm to Trump, because I felt as though there's no way you can explain it away. Jacking all those documents, hiding all those documents, keeping them in insecure places, bathrooms, ballrooms, bedrooms, etc. It was so inexcusable and inexplicable that I felt it was a real sad thing that never really got altitude because of a decision to try it in Florida.
Yeah, and I think too, just to go along with that, if the American people could see what the results of this, not just incompetence, this gross neglect or worse. Maybe there's stuff in there, for instance, about selling information or about being compromised. We don't know because we haven't seen the report, so we're speculating. But there's a reason why there are regulations about the safety of national security documents. It's because if it gets into the wrong hands, it's devastating for the country as a whole. And so the harm that was caused. You know, there were people walking around Mar-a-Lago with this stuff so insecure, who weren't looking out for the interests of the United States. They were enemy powers. And the idea that this former president, is somehow competent to hold the highest office, we would have seen how grossly neglectful, incompetent, well, neglect is too kind a word, really, how hostile he is to American interests. And you know, the idea that Republicans are about national security, unfortunately, in going along with this wannabe dictator, they've really abandoned even the most basic values of looking out for the safety of American citizens.
Well, I just, as a coda to that, would say the sane washing of Trump, the justification, the rationalization, the way that Sean Hannity and the Laura Ingrams of the world ride to his side and create some bizarre, twisted rationale for whatever he's doing, even now with Greenland. You know what I mean? They're saying, well, you know, this is good for him, for his Louisiana purchase coming to, please. I mean, so the reflexive musings that he utters out loud of this madman become something that the right rationalizes, and high-profile members of the right wing go up on television and sane wash it for us.
Absolutely. And, you know, I have to say, too, as obvious a danger as the documents case is to American national security, I think an equally dangerous case, maybe even more in my view, is the January 6th case, which, after all, is about the attempt to take not just the riot, right, not just the violence at the Capitol, but an attempt to destroy American democracy, to really have a self-coup. And that plot that I talked about that Adams was foiled in because it was discovered, Trump almost carried it out with the help of John Eastman. The idea was, you know, that they would have the vice president play this role that he's absolutely not allowed to play and refuse to certify valid votes, pretending that they were fraudulent or suspect. That would have thrown things to the House of Representatives, where the states vote state by state, and they knew that they had the votes to win there. This thing almost worked. And what would the result have been? It would have been a self-coup. And so I find that to be as horrible as the circumstances of the documents case is. That really was the destruction of American democracy. That was the thing that Patrick Henry was warning about.
The Presidents and the People is his latest. The Presidents and the People, 5 leaders who threatened democracy and the citizens who fought to defend it. We'll have a link to that book under this video. We'll also have a link to Corey's other books. And he has not only The Presidents and the People, but I believe he has the Oath book that I loved. It was The Oath and the Office, it was called. Yeah. The Oath and the Office. So The Presidents and the People and The Oath and the Office, 2 terrific reads from Corey Brettschneider, and we'll have links to both under this video. I know I'll say this with the footnote, Happy New Year, that we may be talking about less than happy things in the days to come, but I so enjoy our time together, Corey. Thanks, you.
Thanks, Mark. I really love joining you. I love the comments of the guests, and you know, we need solidarity to get through what's coming over the next 4 years. So I look forward to more conversations, and Happy New Year, and especially good luck to all of us.
Thanks. Yeah. I'll look forward to our next visit. Thanks. Corey Brettschneider. Bye, Corey.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Right on. That's a smart guy, that Corey Brettschneider. How great is he?
He's awesome. It's so crazy how many parallels there are to what's current events in history. It just boggles the mind.
Yeah, no, it's true. It really does put it into context. And I love that he visited the fact that that coup attempt on the part of Trump really almost worked. So, Lucy McAllister, my favorite McAllister, she's been with us through thick and thin, and she hits us with a $20
Big
super sticker. Thank you, everyone, she says. A super chat for 20. Appreciate that. My darling Lucy McAllister. And Stan Pollock, CPA, my favorite CPA, Stan Pollock, in the house. Happy New Year, Mark and team. Kim, so sorry for your loss. A $20 super chat.
Thank you. Really, really nice of you.
Stan.
I'll tell you, one of the things about this community, this Mark Thompson Show community, I really feel lifted up and surrounded by people that are so kind and caring. And it's just makes my life better. So thank you to everyone with your messages and contributions and outpouring of support. I really appreciate it a lot.
Yes, indeed. Speaking of an outpouring, look at this on Gavin Newsom. Mary Lynn Young says, talk about a handsome. How about that Gavin Newsom? Oh, Gavin Newsom, she says. He can park his shoes here under my bed any day or night of the week.
Mary Lynn.
He is hotter than hell, she says. Wow. I am telling you, Mary Lynn Young has got a...
Who is having that conversation?
Well, Mary Lynn Young, she's into her Gavin. Wow. Love it. It's nice to have fans, you know. It's nice to have fans. And Trevor Starr in Hollywood, I did want to say hey to a great supporter of the show. One of the OGs of this show is Trevor. Mark, looks like your home was your home and neighborhood spared. So glad you and Courtney and the kiddies are safe. Yeah, we were right on the outskirts of evacuation, and that was the area that was most affected by fire, and so we cheated it this time. I'm really hoping that it's a quieter season, but there are Santa Ana winds that are returning. They're returning a little bit this afternoon, actually. I mean, when I say a little bit, like 40-mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah.
You know, normally that would be something of concern, and it is of concern, but having just come out of 80-mile-an-hour winds, we'll have to, and all you can do is hope, you know. Yeah. Now, I just want to get something clear. So these things that I want, like the Leo thing that we were going to play, you can't play it for me? I need Albert to play it?
No, I can play it.
Okay.
I wasn't prepared, but I can do it. Might take might take a second, but I can make it happen.
Well, I'll intro it again. It angers me on some level when people take these. When I say people, I'm talking about the punditry universe, which is populated by those who are looking to exploit every high-profile disaster in some way for political gain. And Leo Terrell was a distinguished civil rights attorney for years. Then he became a useful idiot to MAGA, and MAGA began to exploit him in the form of his appearances on Sean Hannity's show. And he showed up in any number of contexts to comment on anything, and he speaks with a passion, and he speaks with an anger, that righteous indignation, which is completely concocted. It's theater. So they booked him on the heels of this ongoing tragedy in Southern California, and he made it about politics. Go ahead, Kim.
I can't play it.
Okay. After that,
I'm sorry, but I will say that this is what he said. Can I read what he said?
No, I'm so angry that we're reduced to this. It's not cool. I really, it bums me out, man. It's really a failing.
Me too. I'm sorry. It won't play.
Okay.
What can I do?
Okay. Read what he said. Jeez, I'm just bummed.
I'm sorry. He said, I want to be as clear as possible. The state has been hijacked by the extreme left. They focus on denying their responsibility by yelling out climate change. I heard that before the show. Karen Bass, right before the show, he said, it's climate change. It's climate change. That's a lie. It's poor management on the part of the Democrats. They don't look at fire prevention. What you said, basic forestry as a priority, it's climate change. It's EV mandates. It's preventing oil drilling. It's DEI. That DEI, which is so sickening. What does it have to do putting out fires? But you got a city fire chief who thinks DEI is the number one issue. He goes on to say it's insulting. And you know what? He said, I blame the voters. I blame the media here. He said, Sean, you think the national media is biased? The local media in California kisses the ring of the Democratic Party. They do nothing. They don't ask the right questions.
That's total BS. Yeah. And it's total BS to you, John, too, when you say Leo Terrell is correct. This is how much they kiss the ring. Media, the libs in Southern California. They just threw out a liberal DA. They threw him out. It wasn't even close. and they voted in a hard-ass DA, okay? So you tell me, Leo Terrell and John in our chat, you tell me if that sounds like a group of people in Southern California that's kissing the ring of the libs, of the Democrats. It's BS. I understand the DEI thing, and I get it that that's the cornerstone of all of your arguments. All of us who lost homes, all of us who fought fires, evacuated, all of these losses, it's all DEI. Is that right? F off, man. You know that's BS, and F you for bringing that into the conversation. It's disgusting. You have people who've lost everything, and you have the balls to go on television or come into my chat and tell me that it's DEI. F you. It's so nakedly not that, and yet you hang some argument on that so you can make your cheap shot. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. This isn't forest management or DEI or any other crap that you guys serve up like short order chefs. It's disgusting, and it's so predictable now. Your grotesque commentary is so predictable. There's no compassion. It's all anger at the libs and the Democrats who deserve that. I told you, you can legitimately ask questions about funding, but you cannot attribute everything that happened to some DEI crap or forest management, or it's the liberals in California, the Democrats in California. That's sickening. And you know it's not true. So you exploit it for purely political means. It's horrible. So, Leo, I wish I could play the video so people could see that bullshit coming out of your mouth. It makes me sick. And it should sicken more. And Sean Hannity, who gives you this high profile so you can go, hey, did you see me on Sean Hannity last night? So you can go to dinner with all your new friends. You're just a pawn, man. It's disgusting. I'm sickened by the entire thing.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Sorry about that, but when we get to something that is so destructive and so awful and so many lives at stake, and it's being manipulated for political gain, it makes me nauseous. I do have some additional stories not related to the fire, although I must tell you there's one coda to the fire that I wouldn't mind getting into. I know we normally do Kim's News right now, but I know I have David Katz coming.
Yeah.
So if David Katz arrives early or arrives on time, actually, I'll have to bail on Kim's News. So I was just going to mention something's happening. There's an emerging issue in California. It is related to the fires, and it's kind of the other shoe that we thought would drop. And that is the ability to get insurance.
Ooh.
And I've spoken about this for several years because you could see this coming, the emerging issue around insurance. And of course, you've seen insurers pull out of California in big enough numbers that you had to be asleep at the switch not to realize that, insurers may completely pull out of the state. And that's sort of what's happened. They have made insurance so excruciatingly expensive that it's very hard to get fire insurance in the state of California. There's certain areas in which you can get it. But even Kim, who lives in an area that's not prone to fire, they consider her in an area that is high enough risk that they're not writing policies there, or they're increasing the price of those policies to the point that they're just unaffordable. Isn't that right, Kim? Yeah.
Our insurance, our auto and homeowners insurance are bundled together with the same company. And it has doubled in the last year.
So this could be the beginning of the end for fire insurance in California. Politico writes that this firestorm could be the final straw breaking the insurance market in California. It's been teetering on the edge of insolvency for years. There are, as you know, there's the FAIR Plan, which is essentially a pool of those of us who couldn't get insurance from an independent company, a corporate entity any longer. And so the state has put together the insurance market. And these wind-driven wildfires and the multi-million-dollar homes that were devastated, I mean, that's important because when you're having to pay out those insurance checks, you're paying on homes that are $30, $40, $50 million. I mean, that's not an exaggeration. Up and down the Malibu coast, all those places that we showed you at the beginning of the show, those are insanely expensive properties. There's probably nothing in the Palisades, which has been devastated, that you can get for less than $2 million, and most everything is north of $3 million.
Well, let me tell you that insurance losses from this more than 17,000 acre Palisades fire, the estimate is that it could reach about $10 billion. That is according to a preliminary estimate from JP Morgan Insurance, $10 billion.
Yeah. And, Trump mentions it as well. In many circles, they're doubting whether insurance companies will even have enough money to pay for this catastrophe. He's just dumping all over California. But there is truth that this FAIR Plan, while the state is saying they'll be able to pay out, and again, that's the insurer of last resort. When you can't get insurance anywhere else, it's through the state. They say they will be able to pay it out. We are aware of misinformation, they say, being posted online regarding the FAIR Plan's ability to pay claims. It's too early to provide loss estimates as claims are just beginning to be submitted and processed. But they're assuring that there are mechanisms in place, including reinsurance, to cover claims. So, the insurance is reinsured. You know how that works. Another insurance entity covers. But California faces a double-barreled threat, notes Politico. Private insurers could continue to drop policies and decline to write new ones, as they've been increasingly doing since a series of severe fires beginning in 2017 with the Tubbs fire in Northern California. And the FAIR Plan, which has been absorbing the shrinking private market, could run out of money to pay its claims. That would mean, that actually wouldn't mean going bankrupt. It would draw from primary insurers to recoup its costs under state law, but that would raise rates all across private policies and send rates skyrocketing across California, of course. State Farm dropped nearly 70% of its policies in the Pacific Palisades neighborhood last year, according to a state filing, more than any other zip code in the state. So this very area that was devastated, State Farm pulled out of 70% of those policyholders. It saw the neighborhood as risky. That forced more people onto the FAIR Plan, which was originally created in the 60s, and that was around the riots in Los Angeles. But there's more demand now because of the fire-prone regions of California.
And you need insurance if you have a mortgage. You can't have a mortgage without them having security that there's, if your home is lost, that they have some collateral on the loan. So what does that mean for the real estate market in California and home sales? Will the only people that are able to buy here, people that are able to pay cash for everything, is the mortgage industry going to go, going to tank? And will people not want to live in California because they can't get insurance here?
The people who are self-insuring is what it's called, but it's what Kim's talking about, which means you buy your house for cash and you don't have any insurance because, you're just going to cover whatever loss on your own. Those people exist, but they're a very small percentage because you have to be pretty wealthy to be able to do that. Most of us finance homes or finance a portion of the loan and a portion of the cost, and as a result, that loan is guaranteed by insurance in some way, as Kim has noted, and that's why the FAIR Plan exists. Because if you didn't have the FAIR Plan and you have all of these private companies pulling out of California, you would have an inability to sell homes. You couldn't finance them. So this is I think it's a tricky period, largely because of the loss involving those high price tag properties that I was just talking about in Malibu and Pacific Palisades and beyond. But those are, you don't have to go much beyond just to see the kind of weight that that's going to have on the FAIR Plan. You have almost no option in California as a legislator and a strategist for the future but to continue the FAIR Plan and continue to prop up the FAIR Plan any way you can, because, as you said, Kim, if you don't, you lose real estate in California. You lose people's ability to buy. Now, California is an insanely popular place to live. I understand people are leaving, they're going to Austin, et cetera, as though Texas is some nirvana. They have their own problems. Florida, they have their own problems. And by the way, one of their problems is this very problem. People can't get insurance because of the hurricanes in Florida. So there will always be demand for California real estate, but the reconfiguration of insurance in California through the FAIR Plan and whatever participation of private industry there might be, or just what increase in rates there might be, that's going to be I think, an ongoing issue and challenge in the months ahead. Yep. And so we'll watch it. But as I say, it wasn't something that we didn't anticipate. We saw this coming. And now it's a contemporary concern, largely because of this loss. When all is said and done, it may be the greatest loss in the history of California. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
I welcome him with open arms. He is one of the great legal analysts in the English-speaking world. We are so lucky to be able to talk to him about legal issues, about Trump, about the Supreme Court, etc. You know him as the longtime federal prosecutor, and now he is a defense lawyer in Southern California. How about it for David Katz, everybody?
Hi, great to be with you.
Hello, sir. I was worried about you as well last night as we huddled in place, looking at our phone at the various evacuation orders and the communities that were far flung. You know, it wasn't just the Palisades and Malibu. We saw Hollywood last night and into the Hollywood Hills and Studio City, and there's a randomness and a scary quality to all of this. So I'm glad you're in good shape today, and apparently you were not affected by the fires.
I wasn't affected by the fires, but I sure was by the winds. But I don't want to tell people my problems here. I heard you just talking about State Farm, but I was just on with my State Farm insurance agent. I've had them for 30-some years and still have them. And at least so far, knock on wood, they're treating me well. But yes, we had quite a bit of wind damage up in the hills. And I'm also battling a cold. And my wife and I are living in a hotel at the moment. But except for that, everything's hunky-dory.
Well, I really appreciate you under those circumstances then in particular being with us today. Let me just ask you.
Mark,
go ahead.
Mark,
yeah.
I'm here in an office. People may sometimes wonder about my background. I've never really explained it. But I'm sitting here in my office in Beverly Hills, which is on Beverly and Wilshire. It's a corner office right on here. And the gentleman behind me, that's the federal judge that I clerk for. And up above his portrait is when I became an assistant U.S. attorney, which was actually under the Reagan administration. And that was his Attorney General, William French Smith, who signed my certificate. And we were very proud. I don't want to speak for Senator Adam Schiff, but I think he was one of them like me, that we had one signed by Smith and not one signed by Ed Meese.
Ed Meese, what a great reference. It's been so long. David Katz, let me just go right after the big question. Why can't Merrick Garland just release the report on his own?
Well, you know, if we ever lose our democracy, the wags will say we lost it playing by all the rules of our old system. And Merrick Garland plays by all the rules. And one of the rules is you're supposed to let people who are mentioned in the report comment on it. And somebody can say, hey, wait a second, you said that I was on 29th Street. Well, I wasn't on 29th Street. You see, here's something which shows I was on 23rd. And if that really matters, why report in a huge official document that so many people are going to read that something happened on 29th Street. If it happened on 23rd Street, maybe the guy who owns a restaurant on 29th Street, right, would have some interest in that. And so those are the old rules, Mark. You just tell the targets, and especially the two people who are not President Trump, you know, those two valets and the property manager who worked at Mar-a-Lago. But of course, they've done exactly what Merrick Garland should have predicted. I mean, this was one, you didn't need Katsadamas for this one. There was no question that once they saw that report, that Trump's lawyers would try to find every way they could to get some court not to release it. Would they have thought to go to Judge Cannon? They wouldn't have thought to ever try to do anything but go to their favorite judge in America, Luce Cannon herself, on the pretext that, well, this is a case that has to do with these two men, and these two men have an interest. They don't want that report about Mar-a-Lago to come out with their names. They want to correct something. They weren't on 29th Street. They were on 23rd Street. It said the guy didn't go left. He went right. They want to correct this and that. They want the whole report delayed until it can be corrected, blah, blah, blah. But the farce of all of this is that she has apparently reached out in her order and even enjoined the release of the one that has nothing to do with them. And that has nothing to do about Mar-a-Lago. We've heard that this is a 2-volume report, and one report, one volume, is just about what happened with January 6th, and which happened in the Washington, D.C. case. So she's obviously overreached, but as long as she issued an injunction to answer your question, first of all, it's perilous to do something that even a judge who the nation may hold in low esteem, even the argument that, well, it wasn't really contempt because the whole nation knew that she was in the tank for Trump, that's not a defense to a contempt citation. And so he wants to have an order, Merrick Garland does, from a higher court that says, no, that injunction by her is dissolved and you can release the report. But right now he's really on tenterhooks, Mark, because they reported in some of the chyrons that he will release report, or Merrick Garland will release Jack Smith's report, at least to volume 1, as to the D.C. case, the January 6th case. But I think the real reporting is that he told the 11th Circuit, which is reviewing her injunction on an emergency basis, that we have every right in the world to release the first report. They're actually going to stay their hand. And so Trump and his two allies may have gotten quite a long delay of the Mar-a-Lago report. But as to the January 6th report, he says, there's not even an issue here. I should be allowed to release it. I think the way it's going to be played now by the rules is he's going to wait for the 11th Circuit. And the minute the 11th Circuit says, it's fine, Mr. Attorney General Merrick Garland, you can release the January 6th report. I mean, like 10 minutes later, he'll release it. I think Trump's counterplay will be that he'll ask them for a stay, the 11th Circuit, and he'll also have a petition ready in the U.S. Supreme Court asking them for a stay. And so it may be one of those things where, like, at 3:05, the 11th Circuit rules, at 3:07 or at 3:05 itself, they deny the stay. And then Trump asks at 3:06 or 3:07 the U.S. Supreme Court to stay the release of the report. And if there's a couple of minutes in between, then Jack Smith, without violating anybody's order, could release volume 1. So this one's going to be really dicey.
This is interesting because there are a couple of legal things here. You pointed to one, which is the one that makes sense, which is there are people mentioned in the report. We talked a little bit about it in your last visit, who are mentioned in the report, and their case and cases would be affected were that report released. And that's the reason that volume 2, as you've just suggested, wouldn't be released. The other question was related to the legitimacy of Jack Smith and his appointment. Remember, she weighed in on that. That seems to be something. We were talking to Corey Brettschneider, a constitutional lawyer, who was saying this has nothing to do with that because this isn't being released by Jack Smith. Merrick Garland can release it. He's completely legitimate. He's allowed to, essentially release the report on his own. So I can see where the shoe pinches on the first point, which is that people are mentioned in the report who still have ongoing cases. But the second point with Jack Smith's legitimacy, that just is a moot point in this instance, isn't it?
Your other guest may have the A on the constitutional law exam. Because it takes a little bit of a layered, nuanced analysis. But right, if the idea is that Jack Smith doesn't really have any authority, then the argument would go that the Attorney General always had the authority, and it would, go back to him. I guess the counter argument would be that, wait a second, if Merrick Garland didn't do those things, I mean, he maybe supervised them, but he didn't really do those things. Jack Smith did those things. And if Jack Smith had no authority to do those things, it's even worse that we're publishing a report by someone who had no authority to really do the nitty-gritty investigation. But by the way, it is absurd. I rarely say that. I think so many things are arguable in the law, but it is absurd to argue that Jack Smith was not properly appointed as the special counsel, because the U.S. Supreme Court has dealt with this issue. There's an argument that, well, they kind of elided the issue, but certainly courts in the D.C. Circuit have absolutely answered this question over and over again. They've all given the same answer, that this is a proper appointment. One of the mistakes tactically that Jack Smith made was to ever take this case to the Southern District of Florida, where he got a 1 in 3 chance of getting the judge that we ironically call loose cannon, and allowing her to say, well, I'm not bound by the DC Circuit. I'm in a different circuit. You see, she would have been, if she were in the DC Circuit, she would have been bound by all those precedents, which have all ruled that this is a proper appointment. But she could say, well, it's never been decided in this 11th Circuit where I am. And then she can make the argument that some conservative scholars had, that supposedly the U.S. Supreme Court elided the issue. I mean, to say that they elided the issue when they allowed all of those special prosecutors, and for that matter, independent counsels, to issue their reports, to indict people, to say the U.S. Supreme Court never really got what the issue was, or they were just talking about something else and didn't really meet that issue head on. It's really absurd. But, you know, we've seen this system played over and over again. I mean, one thing that shocks me, and I've said this on your show, how fast TikTok and some of these other appeals are suddenly going after the U.S. Supreme Court was so slothful in the tax case, getting the tax returns of President Trump the first time through. They managed to delay that over 2 years, make the special prosecutor make the special prosecutor go twice, or maybe it was the New York Attorney General office, go twice to the U.S. Supreme Court. So it's certainly, they look so political and so partisan, the U.S. Supreme Court and the justices appointed by Trump on there in particular, and the 6 Republicans out of 9 in particular, that, you know, things always go fast when Trump or someone else wants them to go fast, but they can always go slow, especially when Trump wants them to go slow in the Supreme Court.
It's asked by Benet, can't Biden just release it because he has immunity, David Katz?
That is not Biden's style. Everyone who's expected Biden to grasp that U.S. Supreme Court decision from last summer and to say, my God, this changes my entire understanding of what I can do as president. Let me start doing some of those things that I have immunity to do and can never be punished for. And so it's the right thing to do. It's not punishable. I'm going to do it. That's just not the way Biden is.
And
so
then
he won't do it. So Biden won't do it. Biden would consider that leaking, even though he is the president.
CC Ryder asks this, Mr. Katz, why hasn't the 11th Circuit disciplined Cannon by now? She has clearly violated her judicial oath under Canon 3C of Code of Judicial Conduct. Appearance of bias is disqualifying.
You know, we had a judge when I was an assistant U.S. attorney and practicing federal criminal law after that, who was just a joke. I mean, really a joke. He was probably the worst judge sitting in America, and worse than Cannon. And everyone said, how come this judge isn't reversed all the time? And they would send a case back to this judge, Mark, who had said something like, I deny this motion because the defendant hasn't proven it. And they would say, no, you have to explain some detail. You have to tell us like what your reasoning is. Okay. And then it would come back after a year and he would say, I deny this motion because my reasoning is the defendant hasn't proven it. And they would send it back to him a third time. And people just sat around like stupefied that they didn't just remand the case to a different judge, which the appellate courts have all the power to do. But the reality is that federal judges, and, you know, we need this. The framers thought we needed this to have some individuals with enough power to stand up to huge corporations, to stand up to the government. Now, I know what some people are going to say. They're going to say they give them all this power and they put these judges on a throne and they roll over for big companies and they roll over for the government's interest against the individual. But they have to give them this power, and that's certainly how the appellate judges treat them, that, well, so they got it wrong. So this judge that used to sit in LA, that he got it wrong 2 or 3 times in a row, and looked like he was sort of intentionally getting it wrong. Like, ha ha. Supposedly he said at a party, don't believe everything you hear at a party, and certainly don't believe a lot of hearsay. But he said, I can decide them after they remand them a lot faster than they can remand them. It took them all that time. It took the appellate court all that time to think about it with him or with Cannon. And then look at what Cannon does. Cannon came back. She made another egregious error regarding the search, even after they'd made a careful analysis saying that Cannon had gone way too far. And now she's just done this thing. And no, she will not be disciplined. And we'll thank our lucky stars if all that happens is that she gets reversed and we actually get to see that report that we all paid for. And that we have every right in the world to see and analyze about what Trump's involvement was in January 6th. And you can infer, of course, that it was terrible. It sets out chapter and verse of every awful, unlawful thing that Trump did because they were getting to present that criminal case against him. That's what.
Clearly, there's a lot of detail there that is rich with corruption, and we have to see it. But it's a remarkable fact that we're in a country. Corrupt judges protect their own. Maybe Phineas says. I mean, there is a quid pro quo that would reflect a kind of corruption on the part of Cannon, and I think she's expecting Donald Trump to knock her down something. I mean,
you see the legal principle, and you can call it a legal fiction if you want to be cynical, but the legal principle is that the appellate judges are not protecting their own, that they really are a different sort of fish. They're the fish who, the famous line from a federal appellate judge that I really liked was, a trial is a search for the truth. An appeal is a search for error. So the idea is that they're very scholarly and they're looking for errors, especially errors that change the outcome. So a harmless error is one that didn't change the outcome. But if there's been a mistake that changed the outcome, normally what we do is we grant a new trial. We say, okay, you ran that race and something unfair happened, so we're going to run that race again. One of the defects in our system is that generally we run that race again in front of the same judge who made poor calls the first time around. And the argument against just almost automatically having a new judge is, again, what your viewer says, that, well, they'll look out for each other, the trial judges, and that they'll see a case that came from another judge and they'll think, oh, this lawyer or this client is just a troublemaker. They want some judge other than the judge. We all have lunch together. We're collegial. Or it wants a different judge. I don't think that's so much. I think that the judges do come to it with an open view. So I would always want, in a case like that, a new judge. Virtually always, I would want a new judge, even if they think, oh well, this case or this lawyer is a troublemaker. Judge shopping to another judge on the same court. But the argument is that there's familiarity with what happened, and certainly if that's true, if it's a huge antitrust case, if it's like that case in Washington D.C., which is going to end up getting buried, but that Judge Chutkan, she really did know the case well. When the U.S. Supreme Court sent that case back, it made sense to send that case back to Chutkan and not another judge from that court in D.C. picked at random. But my feeling is that most cases are not that complex, and that in the interest of fairness, it should be sent. If it's going to be remanded for a new trial to run the race again in front of a different judge.
Hotspot says Garland and Biden are so worried about doing the right thing for the history books that they are doing everything wrong in this moment in history. Couldn't agree more. This also from Lama Kumeka, Trump will appoint Cannon to the Supreme Court. That was that quid pro quo I was talking about. Do you buy, I mean, this is really not a legal issue. It's more a kind of a question of your general disability. Here's somebody else, Rich, says Supreme Court Justice Eileen Cannon. I mean, she clearly has designs on something, I would think, or maybe she just likes serving Donald Trump what he wants. But might she be served up a seat on the highest court?
I've come to think, this is not like a stringent legal analysis where you
That's
can look
what I mean. Yeah.
And say there's a curveball in this that I see, and if that curveball is thrown the same way, that's why I'm predicting this case is going to come out. And I do that a lot on your show, and that's why I have this very good record, if I do say so myself, of making predictions, because I try to look at it from a real legal point of view. How do I really think it's going to come out? So trying to do that here, where a lot of it's speculation, yes, I think he will choose her. And I can't see any reason why in the next 2 years, let's say if Thomas resigns, that he wouldn't choose her. If he wants to show the world that it's all about loyalty, picking someone who's not even an appellate judge, but is a district judge, That's normally not the way you get to the U.S. Supreme Court. You get to the U.S. Supreme Court, which is an appellate court, by having served very well on a different appellate court. There's no reason why a district judge wouldn't be very good at it. The judge behind you, whose portrait I have up, I served with him as his law clerk on the district court. He would have been a great U.S. Supreme Court justice. But the reality is it goes overwhelmingly to appellate judges. So the world would notice that is a true show of loyalty. You stand by Trump, and Trump is going to do things for you, even that are a little unusual, like picking a U.S. district judge, not an appellate judge. And right now he has enough votes. They're talking about getting Hegseth through. They're talking about maybe even getting Kash Patel through. You look at some of the people they're talking about getting through. Certainly we'll know if there are 51, 52 votes to get these very controversial nominations through. There's no doubt that there's 52 or 53 votes to get Cannon through. She was an assistant U.S. attorney, as I was, as our DA Nathan Hochman is, as our Senator Adam Schiff is. And so that's certainly one of the things that gives you cachet as a nominee like it does political candidate, but it gives her cachet. She was an assistant U.S. attorney. She was on the government side at the Department of Justice. And now she's been a federal judge. Yes, the Democrats don't agree with her rulings, but she made them. They're not that outrageous. She doesn't have the kind of corruption things that would really, get you. You know what I mean? We had a judge here on the Ninth Circuit who had to resign, really was forced to resign before a federal judicial inquiry on sexual misconduct. She doesn't have anything like that. So I just can't see why. And why would he be so beholden? I can't think of any other appellate judge that he's really beholden to. The last thing, if some ally of his really, really wanted it, someone like Cruz, although it's questionable whether Cruz, that great line, I think it was Lindsey Graham's, where he said, if Cruz is ever murdered in the Senate, there'll be 100 suspects.
The other thing I thought I heard another version of that, which is Cruz could be killed on the floor, could be murdered on the floor of the Senate, and you could never get a witness for the trial. It was which is a similar thing. I love all the Cruz lines. Al Franken saying, I was probably Ted Cruz's best friend in the Senate, and I hate Ted Cruz. So
it would be 99 senators, unless they suspected suicide. It would be 99 suspects.
All right, so now I want to go to the sentencing this week, the sentencing in New York. Can you just speak to what's going to happen on that? That's the other Trump issue, the only case that actually came to term.
I'm going to put my Katsadamus, whatever it was. I was 24-0 at one point, so I guess I might be going 24-1. There was a famous pitcher, and he went 23-1 or something like that. And it's obnoxious to go 24-0. So got to break the streak. But I think that I'm going to be right on this one. I think the sentencing is going to go forward tomorrow. I don't think
he will be sentenced. Okay, Katsadamus says in the hush money sentencing, it's the election interference thing, but it was the payoff and then the movement of money, et cetera, for the payoff. So the sentencing is supposed to be tomorrow. Yeah. You think it will go on as scheduled?
I think it will go. The New York state courts have made clear they are not going to delay it. The judge has himself made clear that he's not going to sentence Trump to prison or even to, any kind of onerous home detention. He won't have to wear a monitor or something like that. I think he will. They say that he's implied that what he's going to do is say, I'm sentencing you. I'm returning a judgment against you. This is your moment of judgment. That's what happens at the conviction. A lot of people don't think that just being found guilty by a jury is enough for a conviction. Everyone who said he's a convicted felon, you could debate that back and forth, that he's not convicted because the judge could come out tomorrow and he could say, looking at your motion for new trial, I'm giving you a new trial. Looking at your motion for acquittal, I'm acquitting you as a matter of law. And then no conviction, no judgment. So the day of sentencing is the day of judgment. That's the day from which he really is, by any definition, a convicted felon. He doesn't want to go through his presidency, or a lot of it, having everyone say, my God, they just made a convicted felon the leader of the free world. What a disgrace this is. That's what he doesn't want. He doesn't want that talking point against him. And I think the U.S. Supreme Court's going to say, that's not what our decision was about. in the presidential immunity case last summer. It was not about a talking point. It was not about the fact that people could say really bad stuff about the president. They will say really bad stuff about the president. It's that you really are going to impair the president's duties in a meaningful way. And the sentence that's coming up right now is not going to impair his duties in any meaningful way if all it is that now there's a judgment, you're formally convicted, I'm not imposing any sentence on you. Now you can run up to every court in America that you want and you can complain you didn't have a fair trial and that you ought to have a new trial or that you should have been acquitted as a matter of law. So I think the sentencing is going to go forward tomorrow. I think the play is not to show up. I think that I think he'll do it by phone. I think while he used to play that to his advantage, I think that he's so close to actually assuming president for the presidency, and it looks so bad. It still looks bad. I know he played it to his advantage, but it still looks bad to show up there with a too long red tie and tie up all the traffic and posture around the courtroom. So that's my guess, that he gets no time.
I mean, I would agree. Look, he wanted that audience to deflect, to rationalize, to talk about a witch hunt, et cetera, when he was running for president. He's now won the presidency. He doesn't need to show up and do a press conference there in front of the courthouse. I totally agree with you on that, David Katz. And I'll go even a step further, just in general. He wanted to win the presidency to get out of the legal exposure that he had. That's his whole thing. He doesn't give an S about the rest of this stuff. I think his administration is going to essentially be him on the golf course and, talking about how he's going to buy Greenland and annex Canada and whatever. He'll just make and I think that's all to kind of throw off the scent of the Pete Hegseths and the Tulsi Gabbard appointments, the stinky, stenchy appointments that he has talked about. And by the way, we didn't do this story, but I'll mention it in this context. He was seriously considering Maria Bartiromo to be his vice presidential candidate when he was running. So, his run up to the presidency was marked by all of this bizarre stuff. And he really, now that he's won, he doesn't need to show up to court anymore. So I totally agree with you. I want a quick word, if I can get it from you. Is it the Ninth Circuit? They're ruling on the recording of conversations. This is out of Oregon. Is this right, David? I wonder if you could explain this. This is very important. The idea somehow that you need the consent of both parties or all the parties involved in a conversation of any kind before you can record it.
Well, California and Oregon and some other states have this rule that you cannot just record conversations without the other person's knowing it and without the other person's consent. A lot of people think that they'll have what they'll make you think is a private phone call, and while you think it's private, they're actually recording it, and that they're going to try to use that against you. Now, it's true that they can take notes. They can certainly send you an email. If you send them an email back, that they can use that against you, or a text or anything like that. But there is this sanctity about old-fashioned phone calls. And in particular, so when you hear those things like Michael Cohen wore a wire on Donald Trump, and when Donald Trump said about Stormy Daniels, pay her in cash. And he's actually wearing a wire, Michael Cohen, Trump's attorney is, on Trump. And that was actually, it took a little while to hear, but you could hear it. And of course, it was very damning that he wanted to pay her in cash. It showed again his knowledge that this was an illegal payment, that this was not something you wanted to disclose, but you wanted to cover up. And then people said, oh my God, it's disgraceful, especially California lawyers said, not only is he a lawyer wearing a wire on his client, but that he's wearing a wire and recording anybody without their consent. No, in New York, you're allowed to do that. And in many other states, you're allowed to do it, but not in California and not in Oregon. It's particularly used, Mark, by these sort of guerrilla war right-wingers. And so what they'll do is
Project Veritases of the world.
Right. So they'll get with somebody that they don't like, and they'll be wearing a wire, and they'll be all friendly, and they'll try to get him to say something stupid or embarrassing, and then that's it. Then they can do the endless loop on what's embarrassing. Here's, I don't know, whatever it was, Nancy Pelosi saying, I need to get find a good beauty parlor while it was in the middle of the pandemic. Nancy Pelosi wants a good beauty parlor. While you're suffering, Nancy Pelosi wants to play the endless loop over and over again. And anyway, that issue went up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the federal appellate court that covers the entire West Coast. And they said that it was fine to bar that. It was fine to prohibit that. Believe it or not, the right-wing judges, the ones appointed by Trump who are on the panel, dissented. and said that it was a content-based distinction because the cops are allowed to do that. Now, to me, I don't understand. There are real conservatives, and I have real respect for them. And there are conservative legal doctrines that are worth debating in law school, in courts, whatever. But they say these things that are so stupid. That's a whole different issue. Of course, law enforcement in all of those states, law enforcement can record you if you're committing a crime. They can have somebody, this domestic violence cases, Mark, they're not sure if it really happened or not or something. It'll often be the woman. They'll have the woman call up and say, oh my God, I'm so traumatized. I woke up this morning. I can't believe what you did to me. You touched me. And then the person says on the other line, no, I didn't. Or they say, I'm really sorry, or I thought you wanted me to. And that's, of course, a key piece of evidence. And all the states allow that. This is a different kettle of fish. And for them to say, well, it's got to be okay for people to go wear wires on each other without consent, without telling them, because law enforcement can do that under proper circumstances. To me, that didn't bolster their argument at all. And I think the Supreme Court will stay away from this one. I think the U.S. Supreme Court will say some states have it, some states don't. They'll see it as kind of, and I think it's very good that we have it in California. I think it's destructive, it's corrosive for people to be running around secretly recording each other.
And again, just to reiterate, the Ninth Circuit ruling that indeed it is upholding the existing law, which requires the mutual consent. This was
which means, Mark, you could. I think it means you could sue Project Veritas for violating your constitutional right to privacy and make them desist from doing that. Let them be more open. Let them, journalists ask the person a question, they get an answer, and then they can use the answer right down their notebook.
Sure. Finally, before we say goodbye, you've been so generous with your time. Michael D. says, Mark, please ask Professor Katz if he thinks Trump will find a way to get flags at full staff for his inauguration. It's not really a legal question, but maybe it is. I don't know, David. Tell me, will he be able to just Bigfoot it and say, I want those flags all the way up? I'll certainly be a minute after he's inaugurated, I would guess that he'll put those flags flying fully.
Well, first of all, if I can just take one more minute of your time, I very much like the appellation Professor Katz.
Yeah,
that would be very nice. I was a professor at Whittier College School of Law, which was terrific. I had one student who became a U.S. district judge. I don't know if anyone's followed poor Whittier Law School, but it's one of the only ABA accredited law schools that ceased to be. Nothing that I did, but I was a professor. So professor and criminal procedure was the main thing that I taught. Although I got to tell one more story. I actually tried a former student of mine in federal court, and he was acquitted, as he deserved to be. And that was an out-of-body experience to be representing my former student in federal court. And someone said to me, well, at least you weren't his ethics professor. I said, actually, he did take professional responsibility with me. I don't think that that's going to happen, although people said that the minute that Trump is president, he might turn around and order the flags not to be at half staff anymore. But I just think that as reckless and as self-destructive as Trump often is, he's going to try to stay away from those things. Like you take the Panama Canal and Greenland. That did not enhance his reputation. That was when he does things like that, just as someone who does not want to see him do well, because I think he's such a harm to the nation and the international community. He took huge steps backwards. We're not going to fight with Denmark over that. Denmark is a NATO ally. He just looked unbelievably foolish, and things that he wants them to do that he might have been able to get some of these NATO countries to, twist their arms to do, they're going to be a lot less receptive. They're going to say, you know what, he's a pig. He's so offensive. He's so obnoxious. I'm not going to do anything that he wants, including things that would have helped him politically. I tell you, I think Trump is going off in way the wrong direction. I think he's going to overplay his hand. I think those nominations, I think they're going to be in trouble. They keep saying, first of all, you have to assume that they don't screw up, Mark, on the stand, which is what normally happens. You and I have seen the great confirmation battles. They get worse for these controversial candidates once they actually get up there and start answering tough questions. So who do you think is going to do super great at answering tough questions and not hurt their chances of confirmation more? Bobby Kennedy Jr., you think he's going to answer questions great? Tulsi Gabbard, she seems not to be able to fill out the forms on time or get them in. Who else do they have? This Gepseth, he's very good looking. I mean, wow, he should be the head of the Department of Defense because he's very good looking. He's going to sit up there. He's going to look good the first day in front of the public. And then they're going to say, you know what? He's an airhead. He's not capable of running the Department of Defense. And who's the other one? Oh, Patel. Patel's not going to make it. I'm telling you, that's what Schiff just said.
That'd be extraordinary.
Schiff is on the Judiciary Committee. And
well, I mean, you know, David,
one of the great ones.
Presidents get their appointments through, and I know these guys are, you know, off of a central casting list. Pete Hegseth is only a pretty face, as you say, and Patel is a political henchman. But I hope you're right, of course. But I just think at some point, you know, flooding the zone with all of these picks, you know, some will get rejected, but on some level, they're going to, I think, let some get through. And the last thing I'd say is, you know, you bring an optimism to things that I'm encouraged by, but I see this new media climate as sane washing Trump and sane washing his insane picks. You should watch a little bit of Fox News Channel, and you should listen to a little bit of right-wing radio, the way they justify and rationalize and explain, even the Greenland stuff. I mean, this absurd stuff that, as you suggest, is sort of, it's reputationally harmful. Not really. You watch on Fox News Channel, and everybody's beginning to explain that, you know, this is Trump's Louisiana Purchase, and it's brilliant. And, I mean, you know, it's how they twist and pervert rational thought to justify and sane wash this guy. It's insane. And I think a lot of it's going to be happening around at these appointments.
Well, you know, Mark, I'm on Fox and I'm on News Nation sometimes. So I not only see it up close and personal, but I mean, the answer to that one is that Napoleon really needed money, right? The Danes don't need money for Greenland. I know they never argue it or say anything intelligent like that. But you take the Panama Canal, this is a mess. They're going to make the Panama Canal more expensive, more fraught. If you were the head of Panama now, wouldn't you spend money on your military and on your police, just in view of the threats? And then what do you think? How are they going to get the money back for the increased police and army that they need down there? They're going to raise the tolls. And they're just going to pay higher tolls. And all these shippers who are presumably Trump's friends are going to say to him, he's such an idiot. I mean, we knew he was an idiot. He ended up winning. So now we're kissing his butt. But he's such an idiot. All he achieved with this, we're paying much higher tolls for the Panama Canal. What did we just achieve with this?
Everything will blow back on us, sadly. I love our time together. I hope your cold improves. I hope your personal situation related to the wind damage and all the rest, that gets better as well. Thank you for being with us. David is so generous. I'm looking forward to an exciting, eventful year with a lot to comment on. And I appreciate your generosity with your time always. Thanks, David.
I'm actually about to be on a station talking about Carter, because with all that we're suffering out here, you know, it's easy not to think about that. But this was Carter's funeral today. And because I got to his administration when I was 27, I'm someone who's alive today who worked in the Carter administration, and him living to be 100, that's enough to get me on Fox and these other stations, just because, oh my God, here's someone who was in the Carter administration. And I tell him, Mark, like I tell you, don't let my youthful appearance fool you. I was there with Carter.
Well, you're a survivor. I love it. Thanks, David. David Katz, everybody.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I want to get to some Kim news on the way out here, but I want to get some comments on quickly. I will. The flags are at half staff, Mark, not half mast.
Why are you yelling?
What's the difference?
Half mast is when you're out to sea on a ship.
Oh.
Why are you yelling?
Okay.
My God.
You just don't get it.
No, I don't. I guess
I
I don't get it. I mean, I'm with Dillette on this one, which is half mast, half staff, whatever.
It's a pole that's sticking up. It's half of the pole, whatever.
Let me be fair for a moment to pause for mercy. It is a good catch, and oddly, I will take that in, and I will never make that mistake again because of your comment, but it is funny on some level that you would catch it. I know what that's like, though, because I watch and listen, and I'll go, why is that person saying that? That's the wrong term for that. So even as I make fun, I appreciate the correction. Thank you. So half staff is the... Yeah.
I used to work with a guy who got very upset when someone would use the word decimated. He says decimated, the meaning of that word is that every 10th home is destroyed. Every 10th home. So unless it's every 10th home, you can't use that word because that's the original meaning of the word.
That may be its derivation, but that's utterly absurd.
Yeah.
Utterly absurd. I'm just in general picking up stuff from the Corey Brettschneider the conversation. Where's the Roger Stone video that's related? Benaloco is asking, thanks for the $5 super chat. The one with him saying that he had everything in place to cheat. Yeah, where is that video? There are videos and recordings of all sorts that are pretty damning. Chaplain Fred with a huge donation to the show of a $50 super chat. Big shout out to Chaplain Fred. Hi, Mark. He says, I live in Sylmar and my church is available for support. I do hospice and I'm an LAPD chaplain. My home was spared in Sylmar. Love your show. Wow. Well, it's so nice to meet you, Chaplain Fred, and thank you for your generosity. And then your generosity not only with the show, but generous with your spirit in uplifting so many at this time that is a very difficult time in our community. And we're so grateful.
Really nice.
Yeah. A lot of love for him in the chat as well, I noticed. There's a lot of love for Chaplain Fred. Somebody's saying we should have him on the show. Here it is. Phineas.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Nothing is quite working the way it should today. Here is Chaplain Fred. Okay, you want to do it? I can do it. I don't know what to say. Mark should get Chaplain Fred on as a guest. There you go. Yeah, I'd love to have Chaplain Fred on. Chaplain Fred, reach out to the show if you want at themarkthompsonshow@gmail.com. Diamond says, I feel so bad for you and all the people in LA and the surrounding areas. To whom do you recommend we make donations to help those affected by the fires in LA? Wow, that's a great question, and I don't really have a great answer for you. The number of different agencies and organizations that need help. Look, when you're talking to me, I'm particularly sympathetic to all of the animals, large ones, small ones, that have either been orphaned, harmed. These organizations, they've had to evacuate all these creatures. I try to find one of those personally, but I think it's great, Diamond Dave, that you're in that place where you're trying to support, and I would just say thank you. I would do a little bit of research on that. It's a mast half full. Glad you're okay, Mark. My son is going to UCLA, staying in Van Nuys. Smoke is everywhere, says Rayam Hill. Yeah, thanks for the super chat, Ray. And you're right. In fact, Kim was saying that her, your niece, right,
who's a freshman at UCLA, she could see the flames from her dorm room, and it looks at night like it's closer than it really is. But they, at that point, weren't evacuating the campus. And yesterday they canceled classes at UCLA. So she went to LAX with her two roommates. One's from Washington, D.C. and one from Hawaii. So I'm sure their parents are, far away, worried about what's happening here. They all went to the airport. And this is interesting. They got flights at one price. And when they got there, the airline tried to inflate the price. And my sister kind of fought back on that, but total price gouging as everyone flocked to the airport to try to get out. But they are now in Petaluma, my niece and her two roommates from out of state.
Wow, that's so disheartening, isn't it? It really is. Louise says, I live in Pasadena, the town closer to the fire. Altadena is mostly a wasteland. It was this quaint town of mom and pop shops and now nothing. It's so true.
Oh, no.
Altadena, sort of in the foothills. It was a beautiful community. I don't know, I'm sure there'll be many who want to build back, and try to rebuild what was there. CC Ryder on the campaign from the right. The GOP still uses a ton of physical mail. My grandfather was duped, got on a MAGA list, and I was shocked at the sheer volume of mail from everyone. GOP, MAGA, Trump family, Christian MAGA, promoting lies. It's interesting, too, because older people are particularly connected to old school mail, right? It's the way we've gotten our mail for so long. Like you kids, it's all email, but us oldies, that still is important. On the boyfriend that is Kim's idol, Anderson Cooper, all ashed up and ready to go.
Yeah.
Janet says, the Andy Cohen quote is, you can't punch the handsome off Anderson Cooper.
Right? I mean,
He
and I
is a hottie.
realize he's gay. I get that, but I'm just saying that he was a
Well, gay guys are the most handsome guys in the whole town. I mean,
What
you know.
is that? That is the craziest thing.
That's how you can tell I'm straight. Look at me. I'm not nearly handsome enough to be gay.
You think you could punch off the makeup that they used for the ashes, Kim?
Yeah, it was all makeup, Kim. He was nowhere
No,
near
it
those.
wasn't. You could see even his hands were sooty.
That's the whole point. He starts with the hands. You put your hands in the makeup, and then you go like that, and you're
no. He was out there all night talking to people. Whereas David Muir just emerged from the trailer when it was time to do the live shot.
I don't know. I don't think so, Kim. I think that Albert's
maybe
right.
David Muir just pulled the jacket off the clothes hanger and just put it right on his back. It was like that.
Yeah.
It was already doctored.
Yeah, maybe you already had those clothespins on it.
Yeah,
That's
right.
right.
Sure.
How are you?
To really
Yeah,
hug
that's
his
great.
figure. Yeah.
I love
Albert,
it.
thank you.
Mad respect for David Muir and anything you got to do to bring it forward. Tiffany says, the Cali wildfire destruction is utterly heartbreaking. To top it off, we've been left with a self-serving, idiotic madman who doesn't care in the least about humanity or our planet. You know what I'd say to that? Hear, hear. Yeah. And sadly, it is true.
We never got to that Leo Terrell video, if you did want to get to it.
I kind of went off on it earlier. First, I went off on the fact that you weren't here to play it. Then I went off. I went off on the fact that Kim couldn't play it, okay? Because I thought, well, if you're not here, Kim can play it. And she goes, I think I can. Oh, my gosh. Okay, I can, but I'll need some time. So I ramped it up again. And then when it came time to play it, she goes, I can't play it.
And then
I became frustrated.
I know, but I couldn't stop
it was like
you.
Whoever is producing this thing has no idea what they're doing.
So then I went off, and so then Kim said, well, I can read what he said, but I was so angry that we couldn't see the video that I said, well, don't read it. No, I don't want it. Just forget it. And I said, I'm taking my ball and going home. And then I realized, well, you've just ramped up to this Leo Terrell thing. You may as well have Kim read it. So I said, okay, go ahead and read it. So I angrily agreed to that. And she, reading it, actually was really good. And then I went off in anger at Leo Terrell. So we've kind of done it, is my point. So thank you. But we do have to get Kim to the point that, yeah, I did get spicy. It's true. Rich is right. And I own it. I just explained it.
I like a little spice from you sometimes.
I was I was annoyed.
Action.
Yeah. Anyway, it was
Albert, thank you.
Yeah, anyway. The point is, we've got to get it so Kim can run these things. I thought she could easily run it.
Well, I did, but it was a big gray blob. It wouldn't go. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I
blame you.
All right, maybe it's my fault somehow. Okay. Yeah. I am, though, grateful, Albert, that you're now here. And,
I'm bad. I'm sorry.
I blame Tony, says Trevor. Yeah, why not? I'll tell you what I blame Tony for is my camera issues. I am going to have thanks, Tony. He built this computer.
It was wrong.
It
was stupid, and I'm trying to be a better person.
I know. I don't know what's going on. I hope your dog is okay, Albert, is what Gordon's saying. Yeah, Albert had to jump out.
All good.
All good.
He's my senior dog, 16 years old.
Oh.
Soon to be 17, so.
Wow, that's
still
great.
Hanging on strong.
This is an interesting moment. I'd love it if you could find it, Albert. This was kind of weird. Kathleen Bryant says, Mark, has anyone ever told you look like Steve Guttenberg's younger brother? No. But thank you. Now, the funny moment to which I've referred, and maybe you can find it, Albert, it's a spur-of-the-moment thing, is Cheryl says, Mark Spice is part of the reason I love the show. Thank you. The moment, this is early on in this entire thing. There were a lot of sort of inflection moments in this ongoing tragedy that's afflicted Southern California. But one of those moments was when firefighters in their trucks couldn't get up a street that had been clotted with cars. It was literally blocked because so many people were trying to evacuate, and it was just gridlock. And they were told, many of them, by law enforcement, get out of the car, just walk toward the ocean. And that's what they did. So there are all these cars, there are no keys in the cars, and there's no way for these fire trucks to get up, and you can't get to these places in Pacific Palisades up this, it's called Palisades Highlands, or I think it's Highlands is what it's called. Mm-hmm. So you can't get to this Palisades Highland unless you drive up this long, right? And there are no air support because the winds are blowing so high, so intensely. So Steve Guttenberg, I'm trying to give Albert time to find it. Steve Guttenberg is being interviewed, but the reporter doesn't know it's Steve Guttenberg. So Steve Guttenberg is there going, he's pleading. We need people to leave keys in their cars and we can move them out of the way to get these firefighters up. And the reporter at the end of the run that Guttenberg's giving him goes, "Thank you so much, sir. I think that's such an important, you're just a concerned citizen. What is your name?" And he said, here it is. He said, "I'm Steve Guttenberg." And the guy still didn't know who he was, okay? And then clearly he's being told in his ear, "It's Steve Guttenberg. He's an actor. Cocoon, 3 Men and a Baby. He's a big star, you moron." Okay. But I mean, to be fair, I mean, there's a lot going on, but the guy clearly didn't know he was Steve. Yeah, here it is. Here it is. Go ahead, listen.
Palisades Drive, if anybody has a car and they leave their car, leave the keys in the car so that we can move your car so that these fire trucks can get up Palisades Drive. Yeah. What's happening is people take their keys with them as if they're in a parking lot. This is not a parking lot. Yeah. We really need people to move their cars. So if you leave your car in Palisades Drive, leave the key in there so a guy like me can move your cars and get them up there so that these fire trucks can get up there. It's really, really important.
Thank you for talking to us live, sir. What's your name?
My name is Steve Guttenberg.
Steve, do you live in this area?
I live in the area. Yeah, I live right up the hill, and thank goodness everybody back. But I have friends up there right now, and they can't evacuate because it's stuck on Palisades Drive.
You're an actor.
Yeah, I'm an actor.
Okay, now you look familiar. You look familiar to me now.
Yeah.
So, sir, you have family up there. I was just talking to that gentleman. He has a mom who's stuck up in the hills.
Yeah, there are people stuck up there. So we're trying to clear Palisade Drive, and I'm walking up there as far as I can, moving cars. But people don't take their keys with them as if it's a parking lot. There are families up there. There are pets up there. There are people who really need help.
And you told us that this is one of those situations. We have seen this. People are not able to move. We were in our live truck. We couldn't even move.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, Albert. That's good. But I just love that
Later
moment.
on, they came with a giant bulldozer and bulldozed all those cars out of the way. We had video of that on the show yesterday.
Yeah, they had to do it. No, Peter, I understand. Steve Guttenberg couldn't care less if the guy recognized him as an actor. He just wants people to be aware of what's going on. No, I'm not suggesting Steve Guttenberg cares. But it just was funny for the rest of us watching. I saw it live, and it was crazy. I'm thinking, dude, it's Steve Guttenberg. I mean, he really has been in some pretty high-profile projects. How dare you work as a reporter in Southern California and not know the culture of show business?
Why are you yelling?
You have a responsibility to know show business people.
Why are you yelling?
They're more important than the rest of us.
Why are you yelling?
So, yeah, I don't think Guttenberg cared. But
Do you know who I am?
Yes.
I'm kind of a big deal.
Right.
That would have been a good, will Albert know it, live on air.
Oh, that would have been. Now, Albert, I'm guessing you would have known Steve Guttenberg. Am I wrong?
Maybe not in the mask and everything, but if I saw him in context, yeah, I'd recognize that he was an actor.
No, but so he didn't have the mask on when he was talking to him initially. He had a hat on.
Mm-hmm.
Would you have known? Well, I'll put it this way. Now, Albert is pretty young, so I don't think he may not know. When was 3 Men and a Baby out? I mean, that was probably, next to Cocoon.
Google it.
Okay.
Was that 90s?
Was it the 90s? So, Albert, are you aware of, I don't know. You don't think so? So you think when he said, "Sir, your name," and he says Steve Guttenberg, you wouldn't have known who he was?
I don't think I would have. I'm born in 91, so I'm
3 Men and a Baby, released in 1987.
Oh, you're right. Oh, wow. I am
what?
I am old. The Police Academy movie, of course. Dirk is jerk says Police Academy. Yeah, Police Academy was the height. Where is it? BW Rock says Police Academy was at the height of his career, in my opinion. Yeah, that's right. He was through the Police Academy. I used to play. I played cards with him a few times. Very nice guy. Very, very nice guy. Many of his movies have a huge following. His voice is recognized. Police Academy, says Tammy.
Police Academy, released 1984.
Yeah.
No, that's a no for Albert.
Albert, it's weird, man. It's weird to be old and not think you're old. That's the way I know I'm old, because I just, I look at the driver's license and see that I'm old, but I don't. And I also, I have physical things that remind me that I'm old. But I have to tell you, in my mind, I just feel like I'm not. And I feel like this is the big thing. I feel like everybody's my age. That's the weird thing.
It is weird. Cocoon, released 1985.
God, that was
Doesn't
a
that feel
great,
like yesterday? Come on.
that was a great movie, Albert. You ought to see Cocoon. You really
Albert's
ought
like,
to.
yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm going to get right on
movies.
that. I used to recommend to Albert on KGO all these different movies because, I felt, God, man, I've got this young guy and I can enrich his life with these recommendations. And I wasn't obnoxious about it, but every couple of weeks I would say, you ought to check out this documentary. It's really good. It's not a hard watch. And then I realized slowly that Albert is not ever going to watch any of these things.
I'm just not a huge movie guy, so I just love to watch my sports.
I love it. I love it. Kim, I wanted to get your news, and I can't, but I do want to just quickly. I
was going to chit you, but you're kind of on a roll there.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly though touch base on the fact that Jimmy Carter's service was going on today, right?
Right, and it is over. His body is back now on the way to Georgia for burial. President Biden spoke. Carter's 3 grandsons spoke. Former President Ford's son Stephen spoke. And there's the picture. You can see all the presidents and their wives, except for Michelle Obama. And then Kamala Harris is there as well. And behind Clinton is Al Gore. You can see him in the background there. But that is the picture of all the living presidents sitting in a row today. I'm not sure what happened to Michelle. She couldn't make it today.
What a tough sit that is for Obama, right next to Trump. For those who are just listening, if you're just listening and not watching, it's Clinton from left to right, Clinton, then Hillary, right? Then George Bush, then his wife.
Laura.
Right. Then you get who?
Obama.
And next to him?
Followed by Trump and then Melania. And what's interesting is usually Michelle is seated next to George Bush, and that's how they became friends at state funerals and events, because they always got seated next to each other. So there are pictures, though, today of President Obama and President-elect Trump leaning over and talking to each other, and Obama appears to be smiling. There's also a picture of Trump looking over. You can see that Vice President Harris is seated in the pew in front of Trump, and he's kind of leaning over and giving her the side eye in one shot. So interesting dynamics. Yeah, in the front pew, it's President Biden and Jill Biden, and then Kamala Harris and her husband, Doug Emhoff.
Yeah, the front pew is fine because you don't have to sit next to anybody you don't like. But Obama is sitting next to Trump. And Trump, of course, just wants to go. But Obama must have joked to Trump at some level because he's sort of smiling next to him.
Yeah, there are pictures of them not. It doesn't look like they're engaged in animosity. So.
Yeah, Melania is thinking, there's a sale at Chanel. I want to get there before they close. Mars, so there they are, and Trump talking to Obama. Mars asks, how do they preserve the body while they parade it around for a week of ceremonies? Cryogenic insulation? I don't think it's an open casket, dude. But a good question. I love the idea of a cryogenic insulation. That would be lovely. This is anyway. I thought that was important too. There's
Thanks
a lot.
for those pictures, Albert. Good job.
Yeah, thank you, Albert.
Albert, thank you.
Yeah, but any pictures of Steve Guttenberg, Albert, that you could put back up just to from a 3 Men and a Baby, maybe. I would 3 Men and a Baby, Albert. There's 3 men. If you can name one of the other men, I will Venmo you $10.
See, that's really not fair. That's very ageist.
3 Men and a Baby, there were 3 men.
I can name one right now.
How dare you Google it? I see you Google it. How dare you? How dare you?
I got to turn off Google. I can't look at the chat. I know everyone in the chat knows it. I couldn't name one.
Yeah, Tom Selleck would have been a good. Yeah,
I know Tom. Tom Selleck has the mustache.
Yeah, that's right. He has the mustache. Tom, but and who was the third? Everybody's saying Tom Selleck. No, Billy Crystal is not correct. The third wasn't it Travolta? Am I wrong?
That
I don't really remember it.
No,
it was
one.
Ted Danson.
Yeah,
Ted Danson, maybe.
I think so.
Google it.
Ted Danson's one of those people. He's looked the same age for the last 20 years.
It was Tom. Let me just look to Dillette. God, Dillette, who I'm going to make producer on this show. Jeez. Tom Selleck and Ted Danson. Thank you, Dillette.
Yeah, it was Ted Danson.
Yeah, okay.
But it wasn't John Travolta in a later one? Because there were like 3 Men and a Baby 4, 5, 6, right?
Yeah, can you
Google it?
All right, check to see, and then I can get out of here. Can you check to see if it was? I believe Travolta was in one of them. It was a big hit. Oh, he was in Look Who's Talking, Sandy says, John Travolta. Oh, that is really great, Sandy.
Baby, movies that make babies speak.
Yeah,
exactly.
Kind of thing. That was the baby who was talking. Yeah, people, Look Who's Talking, says Wes. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, babies didn't speak in my movies when I was growing up, unfortunately.
Yeah, no baby speaking in your movies. Obama asked, what was being said during that service? Obama asked Trump if he could go to the sentencing tomorrow. Thank you, Franco, for a laugh here at the end of the show. It's very funny. There it was. You had it for a second. The picture of the 3 men and the baby. Yeah. So that's Ted Danson, that's Tom Selleck, and Steve Guttenberg, a Pacific Palisades resident who I'm sure didn't fare well. I mean, it was a very unforgiving event in Southern California. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
I wish we could hang out. Wes Theory, thank you for a super sticker. Wes, you are truly an OG of the show, and I thank you very much.
Big shout
out to you. Thanks, everybody who does support the show in so many ways. Yeah, the baby in 3 Men and a Baby is probably grown up by now. That's a great point. Albert, why don't you follow up on that? Find us the baby from 3 Men and a Baby and find out what they're doing.
Google it.
Yes, Google it. Look, you're doing Florida tomorrow. I know that you're working on that. But if you could also please follow up on the 3 Men and a Baby.
I do have an answer.
Go for it.
They're actually twins, and they're all grown. It's Lisa and Michelle Blair.
Wow. Very good. Albert, everybody. I love it. Shadow, take us home.
I'm Shadow Stevens for The Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Thank you, Kim.
Out of time. Bye.
Love you, Kim. Love my Albert. Until tomorrow, everyone. Thank you and bye-bye.